I've encountered a few strange occurrences that might be paranormal, though I don't jump to conclusions about ghosts. I'm not the type to assume something is supernatural right away. I always prefer to think things through logically and look for reasonable explanations before deciding if something is actually unexplainable. We recently moved into a new house, and it happens to be quite near the local crematorium, maybe just a 5-minute walk away. The house itself isn't ancient. It was likely built in the 1960s or 70s, but it's not like it's old enough to be historically significant or anything. However, the instant I first walked through the front door, I immediately sensed that something felt off. The energy here is completely different from our previous home. It's hard to put into words precisely, but there's just this distinct heaviness in the air that wasn't present before. My husband even noticed it, and he's typically quite skeptical about things like this, so my boyfriend's mom came over to help us with the unpacking. She's not really a believer in paranormal stuff, but she gets easily spooked if anything weird happens. She was sorting through some moving boxes in the garage when we suddenly heard her footsteps rushing back into the house. She burst into the living room looking completely terrified, and immediately asked us, "Did one of you just throw a ball at me?" We were all just sitting there watching TV, so we told her no. None of us had even been near the garage. At that point, her partner mentioned that he remembered seeing a ball sitting in a bucket out there earlier when he was bringing things in from the car. My boyfriend's mom just stared at him and said, "Well, that ball just came flying past my head out of nowhere and landed right back in that bucket. And I swear it came from behind me." Honestly, when she told us this, I actually felt a little thrill of excitement. Since we moved in, there have been quite a few other incidents. Sometimes when I'm home alone during the day, I'll hear shuffling and scraping sounds coming from the garage, like someone is dragging boxes or moving heavy furniture around. At first, I thought maybe it was just the house settling, but it definitely sounds like deliberate movement. But the scariest thing occurred about 2 weeks ago. I was home completely alone. My boyfriend was at work, and we dropped our dog off at his mom's house for the day. I was just relaxing upstairs in our bedroom, probably scrolling through my phone or watching Netflix, when I started hearing really loud banging noises from downstairs. It wasn't just one or two sounds either. This went on for about half an hour straight. It sounded exactly like cabinet doors slamming shut, or like pots and pans were falling out of the kitchen cupboards and hitting the floor. There were also these heavy thudding sounds like furniture was being knocked over, or something substantial was dropping. I kept waiting for it to stop, thinking maybe something had just fallen and caused a chain reaction, but it just kept going. I was absolutely terrified to go downstairs and investigate. I literally sat there frozen on my bed, texting my boyfriend, asking when he'd be home. I didn't move from that bedroom until I heard his car in the driveway. When we finally went downstairs together, everything looked completely normal. Nothing was out of place at all. And then there's all the weird stuff that's been happening in our actual bedroom, which is honestly the most unsettling part. Ever since we moved into this house, my sleep has been absolutely terrible. I keep having these really vivid nightmares. Not just random scary dreams, but specifically dreams about this house. In the dreams, it's always the same layout as our real house. But there's this really heavy, oppressive feeling in the air. One night I woke up around 3 a.m., and I could swear I saw the reflection of a tall man standing in the corner of our room. I could see him clearly in the mirror on our dresser. Just this dark figure standing completely still. Then I squeezed my eyes shut, and when I looked again, nothing was there. But honestly, the most disturbing experience didn't even happen to me. It happened to my boyfriend, and he's usually even more of a skeptic than his mom. He told me about this a few days after it happened, because he wasn't sure if he should mention it. He said he was taking an afternoon nap while I was at work, lying on his side of the bed when he suddenly felt the mattress dip down on my side like someone had just sat down or climbed onto the bed. It felt so real and so unmistakably like another person getting into bed that he immediately jumped up and practically threw himself off the mattress. He stood there for a few minutes just staring at the bed, but obviously no one was there. So yeah, that's basically what we've been dealing with since we moved in. I'm curious to hear what other people think about all this stuff. My mom just bought a new house up in the Appalachian Mountains, and I'm honestly still getting used to it. We've lived in this area our whole lives, but we always lived down in the valley where it felt more sheltered. Now we're literally right on top of the mountains, and the view is crazy. It's kind of funny because my mom and her boyfriend are really into their Christian faith, going to church every Sunday and all that, but me and my younger sister, we're more drawn to spiritual stuff and believing that everything in nature is connected, like the trees, the mountains, even the rocks have their own energy. Sometimes I think my mom worries about it, but she doesn't say much. What makes it even more interesting is that we have Native American blood from my great-grandmother on my mom's side. She was Winnenadot, and my mom absolutely adored her. She used to tell us stories about her all the time when we were kids. I think being up here in the mountains makes me feel more connected to that part of our family history somehow. Like maybe my great-grandmother would have loved this place too. I've been seeing spirits since I was little, but my family has always thought me and my sister are just being dramatic or making things up. They're nice about it. They don't straight up call us liars or anything, but I can see it in their eyes when we talk about protecting ourselves with sage or salt lines. The thing is, I've had some really terrifying encounters before. There were times when I felt like something was literally trying to rip my soul out of my body. But what happened in this new house was on a completely different level. The house itself has this heavy history. We're living in what used to be an old coal mining town. You can still see some of the old structures scattered around if you know where to look. The previous owners bought this place and spent almost 2 full years gutting and renovating everything. They put in new floors, updated all the plumbing and electrical, painted every room, the works. It's actually really beautiful now and super comfortable to live in. But I'm starting to think that no amount of renovation can change whatever energy was already here before they started fixing it up. It's super windy up here, but I've lived in windy places before, so I know what wind sounds like when it's blowing past a window or through cracks. This was different. It's also freezing cold. So it was around 9 at night, and I was in the bathroom when I first heard it. It was this really clear sound of someone whistling, like a person whistling a tune, not just wind making noise. The weird thing is nobody in my house can whistle. My mom can't do it. Her boyfriend can't. My sister can't. And neither can I. We were all watching TV together before I went to the bathroom, and none of the shows we were watching had any whistling in them. So I'm standing there in the bathroom, and I hear this perfect human whistle coming from somewhere in the house. My heart just dropped, because I knew it wasn't coming from any of us, and it definitely wasn't the wind. Right after I heard the whistling, my mom and her boyfriend suddenly started fighting downstairs. But here's the thing. They had absolutely nothing to fight about. Like they were getting along fine just minutes before, and then out of nowhere they're yelling at each other over stupid stuff. I went upstairs to my room and the whistling just kept going all night long. I tried everything to block it out. I started reading a book, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and even played a drama show on my phone turned up loud. But I could still hear that whistling clear as day, like it was cutting right through everything. The sound was really specific too. It was like when someone whistles really loud to call their dog back, or when you're hiking and someone whistles to get your attention from far away. But it also sounded exactly like a bird call. Way too perfect and accurate to be a real bird, though. We do have neighbors around here, but they mostly keep to themselves. When they need to call their dogs in, they just yell the dogs' names like normal people do. They don't whistle. I felt so unsafe that whole night. Something was just completely wrong about the whole situation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was making that sound wasn't human. The only time I ever felt this scared was when some guy was following me home one night. He stopped when he figured out that I knew he was behind me, but that same feeling was there. That awful mix of being super tense with adrenaline pumping and feeling sick to your stomach from pure anxiety. I kept trying to ignore the whistling, even though it sounded like it was coming from right outside my window. Every time I got brave enough to peek through the blinds, there was nothing there. But the whistling just kept going. The really creepy part was that sometimes it would whistle over itself, like there were 2 different whistles happening at the same time, or like one whistle would start before the other one finished. That's not something a person can do. I finally managed to fall asleep somehow, Even in my sleep, my brain wouldn't let me rest because that sound just wouldn't stop. It was like my body knew something was wrong and wouldn't let me stay asleep for long. Around 4 in the morning, my little sister started crying, and that's when the adrenaline finally stopped running through my body. She seemed really scared about something, but my mom was able to calm her down and get her back to sleep. When we went into the kitchen, we saw that our lights were leaking that liquid stuff that makes them work. You know, the fluorescent fluid or whatever. That was definitely not normal. Then I heard someone gently tapping on our back screen door in the kitchen like they were politely knocking. I called out hello from the living room, but nobody answered back. When no one said anything, I decided not to go answer the door. I mean, who knocks on someone's door at 4 a.m. and then doesn't say anything when you respond? I just don't feel safe in this house at all. Something is really wrong here. But I feel like if I tried to tell my mom about all this stuff, she wouldn't understand why I'm so scared. She'd probably just think I'm being dramatic again, or making things up in my head. So I'm kind of stuck feeling afraid, and not really having anyone who would believe me. I want to be clear about something. I do have anxiety, but it's never made me see or hear things that aren't really there. And my anxiety is more like worrying about school or social situations, not hallucinating. And it's definitely never messed with my spiritual beliefs or made me paranoid about supernatural stuff. I've been thinking about what I can do to protect myself in this house. I'm definitely going to buy a dream catcher for my room. I've heard they're good for filtering out negative energy while you sleep. I'm also looking into getting one of those rock salt lamps. My sister says they help purify the air and create positive vibes. The weird thing is, before we even moved here, I felt this really strong urge to bring my amethyst and my biggest quartz crystal with me. Like something was telling me I was going to need them. I usually keep them on my dresser at home, but I just knew I had to pack them. I'm planning to put them on my windowsills. I read somewhere that crystals can create a protective barrier. I'll probably put a bowl of salt next to my bed too, since salt is supposed to absorb negative energy. But honestly, I'm kind of at a loss for what else I can do. I feel like I need more protection, but I don't really know where to turn or what would actually work against whatever this thing is. I wish I had someone experienced to talk to about this stuff. Story 3. This happened more than 10 years ago when I was 12 years old. I lived in a small town in Oklahoma where everything is pretty quiet and spread out. The houses in my neighborhood aren't close together like in the city. They're pretty far apart with thick woods between them. It was just a regular Tuesday, I think, and my grandma came to pick me up from school like she always did. She drove me home in her old blue Honda that always smelled like her perfume and those mint candies she kept in the cup holder. This was actually a big deal for me because it was the first year my parents finally let me stay home by myself after school instead of going to grandma's house. Now before this, I always had to go straight to grandma's and wait there until mom or dad got off work. But now I was old enough to be trusted alone for a few hours until they came home. Grandma would drop me off around 3 and my parents usually got home around 4:30, so I was only alone for like an hour and a half, which wasn't scary or anything. But this day was different. My dad had to work late and wouldn't be home until around 7 class. And my mom is a teacher, so she had those parent meetings at school that night and wouldn't get home until 8. I remember thinking it was no big deal. I'd been home alone before, just not for this long. 5 hours seemed like forever when you're 12, but I figured I could handle it. I had snacks, TV, and my video games. When I got inside, I did the same thing I always did. I ran upstairs to my room, turned on my Xbox 360, and started playing with my friends online. That day, it was just me and my friend Seth playing together. We were building this huge castle or something. I had been playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door slam shut outside in my driveway. That was weird because nobody was supposed to be home until 7 sao. And it was only like 5 hours. My bedroom is upstairs and has a big window that looks right down at our driveway, so I could always see when someone came home. I didn't want to stop playing, so I kept my headset on and held my controller while I walked over to the window to look outside. I looked down at the driveway and saw a red pickup truck. Now the weird thing was how the guy parked. He didn't pull up normal like visitors do. He parked sideways right in the middle of our driveway. I could see a man getting out of the truck. He was wearing a baseball cap and this huge camouflage hoodie with jeans. That seemed really strange because it was September in Oklahoma. Way too hot to be wearing a big thick hoodie like that. By the time I got to the window to get a good look, he was already walking fast toward our front door, and I could barely see him anymore because of the angle. A few seconds later, I heard knocking at the front door. Then more knocking. I was still holding my controller and talking to Seth through my headset, telling him what was happening. I moved to my other bedroom window that has a better view of the front walkway. I could see the guy walking back down toward his truck. He had given up on the front door pretty quick. I went back to the first window that looks over the driveway to see what he was doing next. "Dude, some random guy just came to my door," I whispered to Seth through my mic. He's walking back to his truck now. Seth was asking me questions, but I was too focused on watching the stranger to really answer him. Instead of getting in his truck and leaving, the guy walked right past it and went straight to our garage side door. He grabbed the handle and tried to open it. "Seth, this guy just tried to get into my garage. I was scared he might hear me somehow." Seth was like, "What? Are you serious?" It was still bright outside, like 5 in the afternoon. Sometimes my family forgets to lock it when we come in from the garage, but not today. When the garage door wouldn't open, he didn't leave. He started walking around the side of our house toward the back patio. I couldn't see him anymore from my bedroom windows. I dropped my headset on my bed and quietly ran downstairs as fast as I could. I had to know what this guy was doing. When I got downstairs, I hid behind the wall so he couldn't see me through the back door or the big living room windows if he looked inside. I just stood there and listened. I could hear him trying to open our back door. Then suddenly I heard this loud thud sound like he dropped something heavy on our patio. I had never been so scared in my entire life. I waited a few seconds and then very carefully peeked around the corner toward the back door, but I couldn't see him anywhere. Seth was freaking out on the other end, asking me what I was going to do. Just as I was telling him what happened, I heard another car door slam shut outside. This time, when I looked out my bedroom window, I saw him getting into his red truck. "He's leaving," I told Seth. "He's finally getting in his truck." I felt like I could breathe again. Maybe this nightmare was finally over and he was going to drive away and leave me alone. Now that he was in the truck, I could see into the back of it better. The only things he had in the truck bed were a crowbar and a shovel. That made my stomach feel sick. Why would someone need those things at my house? Seth told me through my headset. "Dude, get your iPod and take a picture of his license plate." I had one of those iPod touches that could take pictures, but the way he was parked, I couldn't see his license plate at all from my window. Finally, he backed up out of our driveway and drove down the road. I watched until I couldn't see his red truck anymore. Even then, I waited a few more minutes to make sure he was really gone and wasn't coming back. Once I was sure he was gone for good, I went back downstairs to see what that loud thud sound had been. When I got to the back door, I could see that our doormat was all crooked and moved around. Both of our big plant pots had been moved too. He was looking for a hidden key. Oh my God. The scary thing was we actually did have a key hidden back there. We kept the back door key under one of the smaller pots that sits on a little ledge by the door. He had only checked under the big pots on the ground, not the small ones up higher. If he had looked a little harder, he would have found it and gotten into my house. I was shaking just thinking about it. I ran around to the front porch to check there too. Sure enough, all the flower pots by the front door looked like they had been moved around and searched through as well. I don't even want to think about what would have happened if he found that key, or if he decided to just break a window or something. I was just a 12-year-old kid home alone. There's no way I could have protected myself. After he left, and I was sure he wasn't coming back, I finally worked up the courage to go to the kitchen and call my dad at work. My dad left work right away and came home. When he got there, he called the police and had an officer come to our house. I had to tell the whole story again and give the cop a description of what the guy looked like. The police officer wrote everything down and said they'd keep an eye on our neighborhood. Thankfully, that guy never came back to our house again, but it was the scariest day of my life.